Good morning, everybody. If anybody doesn't have a seat, you want to grab a seat there, that'll be great. So good morning and welcome to our Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual and Transgender Youth and Social Inclusion Conference here in Croke Park, Dublin. For any of you who are not from Ireland, I just need to say that it kind of shows how times have changed when you can have an LGBT youth conference at the home of the most, I guess, conservative sporting or traditionally conservative sporting organisation in the country. So times really are changing. This event has been brought to you by Belong To with the support of the Department of Children and Youth Affairs in collaboration with the International Gay and Lesbian Association Europe, the International Gay and Lesbian Youth Organisation, the European Youth Forum and the National Youth Council of Ireland. I would like to particularly welcome Minister for Children and Youth Affairs, Francis Fitzgerald, who will open our conference shortly. I would like to also welcome Phil Prendergast, Member of the European Parliament, Councillor Anna Quigley and Deputy Dominic Hannigan. Today's event is the first ever associated EU Presidency conference on the topic of LGBT youth and social inclusion. We're here together to discuss how we can improve the lives of LGBT young people in Ireland, in the EU, in EU accession states, in the Council of Europe and beyond. We're here together today. We have relied very heavily on an EU-wide consultation with 12,000 young people, which identified LGBT young people as one of the most socially excluded groups in all of Europe. And today we want to talk about how we might change this. We have an incredible lineup of insightful, passionate and expert speakers. For example, to share their insights about what is happening in their own country, we have speakers from Turkey, Greece, Lithuania, Macedonia and the US. And I know I've see some faces that were at last night's community forum, so you would have already heard some of these speakers. We'll also hear from Irish experts such as Dr. Jeffrey Shannon, Professor Maurice Devlin and Patricia Prendeville, as well as from international and EU bodies such as the European Youth Forum, IGLYO and ILGA. We're delighted that today has brought together representatives from the European Commission, the Council of Europe, the European Parliament and the Irish Government to discuss how we might better support LGBT young people across Europe. Later on you will hear from Pascal Lejeune from DG for Education and Culture at the European Commission and Curtu Tarjamo from the Council of Europe, Phil Prendergast, Member of the European Parliament, and of course Minister Francis Fitzgerald, who is here representing the Irish Government. The significance of this level of engagement of both the Irish and European governments shouldn't be underestimated. We are sure that today we will build on your commitment to equality for LGBT young people, and we will look back on today as being a very significant day indeed. This year also marks the 10th anniversary or the 10th birthday of Belong To, and we've been working for 10 years now to support LGBT young people in Ireland. And over that period, we've seen some fantastic and positive changes happen for LGBT young people. Young people are now coming out much younger and in much greater numbers than ever before. We like to say that we now have the youngest, outest, if that's a word, youngest, outest, most confident group of teenagers that we've ever had at Belong To, or indeed around the world. Every day, brave LGBT young people are transforming their families and schools and communities by having the courage, often against severe odds, of coming out and saying who they are. In public attitude terms, we have also made some good progress. Issues such as homophobic and transphobic bullying and LGBT young people's mental health have moved from being the marginalised concerns of the LGBT community to being ones of mainstream concern, regularly discussed on mainstream television and on radio. In Ireland, high-profile figures such as Presidents McAleese and President Higgins, actor Colin Farrell, Minister Francis Fitzgerald have all championed the cause of the rights of LGBT young people. In public policy terms, we're making some real inroads in the areas of education, mental health and youth service development. But so much more needs to be done. I think it's important to say that we can't really hold a conference about LGBT young people and social inclusion in Europe without mentioning what has been happening in Russia and how homophobic and transphobic politics and hate crime are taking hold in many parts of Europe right now. Later today, Patricia Prendeville from the European Union's Fundamental Rights Agency will discuss the findings of a survey of 93,000 LGBT people across the EU and Croatia, which found that people are still experiencing extremely high levels of homophobia, transphobia and social exclusion. Two of the groups that have been highlighted to be most excluded have been LGBT young people and trans people of all ages. Irish, European and international research consistently demonstrates dangerously high levels of homophobic and transphobic bullying in our schools, communities, and how this can also have a devastating effect on young people's mental health. But I think it's important also to say that there is no single issue or law that can be changed when it comes to improving the experiences of being young and LGBT today. Where young people are having tough times, it can involve any combination of, and just for example, poor mental health, poverty, class inequality, violence, abuse, racism, sexism, ableism, poor access to education and health services, or lack of mobility and choice. This is sometimes on top of enduring daily homophobia and transphobia. It is important also to note that many LGBT young people across the world are living at intersections of prejudice, for example, the young lesbian traveller, or at intersections of injustice, for example, LGBT young people living in abject poverty, which is increasingly an issue today. So what we need really is a comprehensive strategy to address the complex and intersecting challenges that LGBT young people face. And this is why we're here today. We are looking at how the lives of LGBT young people can be improved by looking through the broad, holistic, established and structured lens of social inclusion. We are talking about how we can improve the experiences in and access to education, employment, rights and youth services. In your conference packs, you'll see that there's a draft Dublin statement on LGBT youth and social inclusion, and we look forward to working with you on that today, and we hope that this can form the basis of some roadmap towards improving the lives of LGBT young people. Before introducing the Minister, which I will in 1 second, I just need to say one set of thank yous. At the very end, I'm going to say thank you to a lot of people, but while the Minister is here, I think it's important to say thank you to her department. And I particularly want to say a huge thank you to Doreen Burke and to Conor Rowley at the Department of Children and Youth Affairs for their commitment and hard work as putting this conference together. We wouldn't have got here at all without your enormous help, so thank you so much. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our Minister for Children and Youth Affairs, Frances Fitzgerald. The Minister has shown incredible commitment to LGBT young people and to belong to. She is a reformer, and already under her leadership, she has embedded for the first time in her constitution the rights of children and has created the new Child and Family Support Agency. These two developments alone will have hugely positive effects on the lives of LGBT young people and their families. She has also shown great leadership in promoting social inclusion through her presidency, and she has also been exceptionally helpful in her work to combat homophobic and transphobic bullying, and particularly to provide direct youth supports to LGBT young people. So I would now like to call on Minister Frances Fitzgerald to open our conference.
Good morning, everyone. You're all very welcome here this morning. Thank you for the invitation to join with you. I'm delighted to be here with my colleague, Phil Prendergast from the European Parliament. We were together in the Dáil, the Irish Parliament, and I'm delighted to see her here speaking on this topic this morning. And also my colleague, Geoffrey Shannon, who is the rapporteur on children's issues in Ireland, an international expert on children's rights and a key mover and advocate in this country to ensure that we do the right thing by children. He's an expert in a whole range of areas in relation to children and was a key advocate in relation to the children's referendum last year. And I'd also like to welcome our guests who are here as well, joining us, and all of you who've travelled to be here at this conference. I'd like to begin by paying tribute to Michael for his own leadership of Belong To. He and his organisation have shown incredible leadership in this country. And I'm really pleased that we're having a presidency conference on this topic here today. It's very important, I think, that we in Ireland show leadership. This is an issue that is not just national, of course, it's international. And it's important that during this period of our presidency that we show leadership on this issue, because the challenges remain both nationally and internationally. And I very much look forward to the statement at the end of this conference, the Dublin statement, which I hope will have an impact in an ongoing way on the presidencies which are about to take place. It's been a great honour for us to have the presidency. Great honour for me to have been chair of the Youth Ministers' Conference, council meeting that we held, where we looked at the issues in relation to youth work and social inclusion. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome Pascal here from the European Commission and to say that a huge amount of work has been done between the Council, the Commission and the Presidency on issues in relation to youth. And this is another important opportunity, I think, to take these issues forward. First of all, I'd like to begin by congratulating Belong To on their 10th birthday celebration. It's always good. I always say as a minister, it's always good to be invited to a celebration these days. And given the challenging times that we face in Ireland economically and the tough decisions we've had to take as a government, to be invited along, as I was recently, to the birthday celebration was very nice. And I do take this opportunity to say well done on the work. It hasn't always been easy. These issues we're discussing today, people find it difficult to have the discussion, to realise the degree of discrimination there has been, and to take the necessary steps. And I do want to pay tribute to my own department as well. And thank you, Michael, for mentioning the support that my department and the staff of my department have given in relation to this conference. But just to say that Belong To has been to the fore nationally and internationally. And I was asked to do a video recently by Belong To in relation to the issues we're discussing today. And, you know, I really said that people's lives are blighted. They're blighted by discrimination. The potential is limited. Creative opportunities are limited. Opportunities to participate in a democratic society are limited by discrimination. For many years, we talked about issues in relation to women in this country and inequality, and we still have some challenges in relation to gender equality in terms of participation and numbers and representation. Those issues remain, but of course we have made huge progress. And in this area we're discussing today in relation to LGBT and young people, many challenges remain. Michael has just touched on a few of them, and we hear even more disturbing stories from other countries about the levels of discrimination, about laws that discriminate, about a denial of LGBT young people in countries, and a denial of access, a denial of the reality of people's life situations. And this is extremely serious, and it is something we take very seriously as part of our presidency. And that's why it's so important that we're having this conference today to make very clear statements about the pathways forward and the challenges that still remain and what we need to do to address these ongoing issues and a lack of awareness and actually overt discrimination. So for all of those reasons, it's good to be having this conference today where we can focus on those pathways forward that will actually have a real impact on people's lives and ensure that for the next generation of young LGBT people in Europe that we open those doors, the doors that were closed in Ireland that are now more open than they were. But as I say, we still have work to do. During the course of the presidency, one of the themes, the key theme that we organised was the theme of social inclusion. And in a way, social inclusion as a phrase captures everything that we need to do in relation to this issue. It is all about social inclusion. And I was pleased that Lithuania and Greece accepted and led in relation to the trio of the presidency identifying social inclusion as an important issue. It's very relevant to all of the topics here today. And what we need to do is have that discussion about what does social inclusion look like during the trio's presidency in relation to LGBT young people. What we've done during the course of our presidency already is we've had that structured dialogue with 11,000 young people in Europe. We've created the opportunity to hear the views of young people and to identify what they feel Europe of the future needs to be thinking and talking about. And of course, what the young people identified, they identified those most at risk of social inclusion are young people with disabilities, young people from a migrant background, and sexual minorities. Overall, many different groups of young people were identified as particularly vulnerable to social exclusion, the most common underlying causes by far being discrimination and, of course, socio-economic situation. And young people across Europe have said that social exclusion is not just linked to age, but to circumstances in young people's lives, which young people feel they cannot influence, namely periods of transition were identified as particularly vulnerable periods. Transition, and we know that from all of the research in Ireland as well. Transition points are extremely difficult for our children and for young people. Transition points from school to employment, very vulnerable period, particularly in Europe at present, given the huge levels of youth unemployment. Many of the conclusions that we reached, I'm very pleased to say, were included in the final document of the Council of Ministers meeting, where we talked about the importance of quality youth work and making sure that youth work is recognised, because youth work can play a role, not just in relation to, if you like, out-of-school activities, informal participation. But youth work, I think, can be an important part of the pathway to inclusion, to social inclusion, an important part of the pathway to employment, and an important part of the pathway towards social inclusion, because young people who find it difficult perhaps to be involved in our more formal structures can get involved in youth work in a way that perhaps they can't be involved in school or more formal employment or training opportunities. So part of the Council presidency was very much, of our presidency, was very much about trying to ensure that youth work is recognised and gets the funding as well, gets the recognition at all of the institutions, the European institutions, gets the recognition so that the access to funding and the permeability, if you like, of youth work with the European institutions, with the funding institutions, is made clearer and more accessible. I think that's really important, and I think it was an important part of our presidency to get the conclusions that we got about the importance of quality youth work and the role that youth work can play. And I think it's very relevant as well for young LGBT people that youth work has the sensitivity and the open doors that are needed in relation to LGBT youth and social inclusion. So I see today's opportunity and today's conference as a key point where we can talk about what is good practice, Michael. You know, what are the examples of good practice that we're seeing across Europe in all of these areas, and what can we learn from one another, whether it's in relation to education, employment, and we are having that round table on youth employment, and I know Michael's going to be involved in it as well at the end of this week. And we have very important discussions in Europe as well in relation to the social inclusion package and the youth guarantee, with my colleague Minister Burton being involved in those later this week. It also, of course, influences the quality of our democracy. I talk about our democracy being half a democracy, an unfinished democracy as far as women are concerned. Obviously, as far as young LGBT young people are concerned, it's equally half a democracy. And participation is important, and we have so much to do to improve the quality of our democracy. I think it's really useful to keep thinking about our democracy as unfinished. Not that politicians need reminding about this. People remind us about it all the time. Our democracy has so many faults. There's no question of that. But, you know, if we can just really talk about the challenges that our democracy still faces in terms of really being representational of all the people, I think it's a useful lens for us to have in our democracy, and certainly does away with any complacency about how well we've done or haven't done at this point. So it just remains for me to say I look forward to the statement which will emerge, the Dublin statement that will emerge from this conference today. I want to give a commitment that in the concluding weeks of our presidency, we will, and I certainly will, work to ensure that the message is carried through to the countries that follow us. To thank you all again for being here today, to wish you good discussions, and thank you for your participation. It's a real pleasure and honour to open this conference today. Thank you very much indeed.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Minister. And it's really fantastic to hear your strong support for the Dublin Statement, and also your words around Ireland being a half-finished democracy when it comes to women and LGBT young people. I think that's a very important point.